Today on Beyond the Awards, we are going to be talking about something every single one of us dealt with. That moment when you have a big idea or a major life decision in front of you, but you're feeling stuck because you just don't know where to start first. You might be deciding on a career path, planning what to do after graduating, or how to get a new project or big idea off the ground, and the scale of that can be paralyzing. So that's why we are going to be talking the art of breaking down those massive, overwhelming goals into small, winnable steps. And joining me are two people who have navigated this many times. Jordan Jans is a Gold Award holder from Indonesia and our international youth representative for Asia Pacific. He used the skills he built during the award to start Karsa, an organization supporting local communities during the COVID-19 pandemic. We also got Al-Karim Khimji, co-founder and CEO of the fintech platform Propra. He built an impressive career in real estate in North America and is now a trustee of the foundation. He's also a proud award holder. Together they are going to be sharing the tips and tricks that they've used to get where they are today. Jordan, let's start with your award experience. When you were working towards your goal, how did you stop yourself from feeling overwhelmed? With all the tasks and activities alongside your education and personal projects, what did the award teach you about focusing on the next small win?
When I was doing my gold award, I was actually in my final year of high school. I was in the most one of the most competitive high school in Indonesia, and it was the last year, so a pretty competitive environment. My day started at 6:30 a.m. and finished late at about 5 p.m. And of course, I had extra courses at night. So yes, it was very full. At first, I felt overwhelmed with this academic obligation, and I have to commit to the award. I even procrastinated, especially when my online record book had issues. I had to switch to a manual one. That transitions actually slowed me down. But over time, I realized I didn't need to manage everything at once. I just needed to focus at one small step at a time. What I could do that week instead of what I could do for the next year. My project Karsa actually started as my Gold Award volunteering activity. It wasn't an organization yet. It was just, small actions, finding friends, building our social media, reaching out to volunteers, one small step at a time. And because the award is so personalized, individual personalized, I was doing something I genuinely cared about. And even though my schedule was packed, it didn't feel draining. It felt actually meaningful. And that habit stayed with me now. Now I'm in university, managing my thesis, scaling my project Karsa, and now volunteering as at the foundation as an international youth representative. It still comes down to breaking things into small and manageable steps.
Yeah, I think one step at a time is definitely a good way to start and a good place to be where you're looking at a big goal. And Al Karim, in your career, especially early on, there must have been moments where you faced some tasks or problems and didn't know where to start. What helped you to overcome that initial stuck feeling and find the first thread to pull on to get a project moving?
I think you're asking a really great question. And I think there's a really important nuance here about early on. I think when early on, sometimes you take on a project and it does feel massive, or you're given some responsibility and it feels challenging. And I know that, what we learn in school often is you receive a project and then you are supposed to do the whole project up to 100%. And what I learned in my journey was if you take that project and and almost like unlearn what you've learned in school and apply it in the professional environment, you have colleagues and peers and leaders in your organization who want to help you. And so what I learned was that in order to really overcome that unstuck feeling, I would talk to a few people about the project initially. And that would really help me better understand the different angles of the problem within the context. So within an organization or within a not-for-profit. And that would help me come up with a better answer, which would then lead to another conversation, maybe with my boss who I would be reporting to. Sometimes you just learn that you need to just talk it out with someone, right? Or you need to spend some time to think through the problem and break it into small pieces. And Jordan, I love your point, right? Small pieces, it all adds up. And it creates value. And I think sometimes it's very easy to get overwhelmed, right, by the size of a problem or the complexity. And I think this is where one of the concepts that I learned when I was in consulting was that it's really important to understand the problem and spend a lot of time on the problem, and then you'll get to the solution. And I think sometimes when we're in a big project, we just have to get started. And I think for me, what I learned in my journey is that if we spend time understanding the problem and realizing that and this was actually the real nugget here, or the nuance, is that sometimes your job is not to just do the problem solving, like to do the work, but it's to get the problem solved. And when I say get them problem solved, that means you got to involve others in bringing them together to get their input, to get their ideas, so that you can have a really great solution or a really great presentation.
That's such a great point about not rushing into trying to do something with an issue and actually getting some time to understand it and get some advice and opinions. And this leads me to another important skill that all the award participants learn, the goal setting. And SMART goals is an approach that many of our listeners probably heard of. I know it might sound a bit formal or like something that it's only required for school projects, but it's actually a great way to tackle your goal setting. Just a quick refresher on what this acronym stands for: S, specific; M, measurable; A, achievable; R, relevant; and T, time bound. So if you're feeling a bit stuck, that's also a good way to start with running your idea through this. So Jordan, looking back, how did that award experience of setting and meeting targets help you found Karsa? How did you use your skills of setting SMART goals to help you bring this wonderful idea to reality?
My project Karsa actually started because of my Gold Award volunteering section. At the time, I knew the volunteering commitment was long, about 6 months to a year, and I thought if I'm going to dedicate that much time, I want to build something that meaningful, not just to complete the hours, but to actually create a real impact. So during the pandemic, access to healthcare in underserved communities was a serious issue. I started small, gathering a few friends, creating the social media, shaping the idea. What really changed was the SMART goals. At first, I didn't fully pay attention to it. The online record book actually encouraged you to use the SMART goals for your activity. So my award leader challenged me to apply to it properly for the volunteering section. Instead of saying, hey, I want to help communities, I had to define how many beneficiaries, what support, what kind of time frame was actually achievable as a 16-year-old. Instead of doing just a high school student project, I can do it with a real impact, just like an NGO did. And that clarity shaped what my project vision is. When I applied funding, which is actually through the Big Six Youth Organization, the Global Youth Mobilization Initiative, they required proposals using SMART goals. And I didn't struggle at all because I had already built the project that way through the award. And by the time I completed my Gold Award voluntary activity, we at 16-year-old, we have done two mobile free medical clinics, real doctors, real medicines, serving rural and underprivileged communities within a clear timelines and measurable beneficiaries. And that's something that I'm still doing and scaling today. It was a big dream, a really big vision, but that goal setting, that SMART goals, didn't limit that vision at all. That SMART goals made it possible.
What a great example. It was a big goal indeed, and I hope our listeners would be inspired by this. And Al-Karim, from your experience, whether during the work, education, or professional life, why is having clear and measurable goals important, especially for young people?
Having a really good plan helps you stay on track. It's really easy to get distracted in the journey. And so I think it really helps with accountability, right? It really helps with understanding what is your role? How do you fit into the puzzle? What is the broader puzzle per se in terms of your ability to contribute, and how does your specific piece of work like why does it matter, and how does it bring value to your organization or to achieve your goal or to your community? And so I think it's actually really helpful, and it could be everything from, when, you're in high school or in university and you think, I want to raise my average from, X to Y by the end of the term. And then you come up with a really straightforward plan to say, I'm going to spend 30 minutes a day, 3 days a week, 5 days a week doing math questions, or I want to make it on the basketball team. I'm going to spend 30 more minutes a day, 5 days a week practicing my free throw. I mean, when you think about like even a project, it's really helpful to have very clear breakdown. Like when we were launching this business, Craig and I, my business partner, we were really clear in the first month, what do we want to achieve? Who wants to do it? What does success look like? And then we did that for the second month and the third month. And we were very clear also in terms of who has to do what. And then we defined when we would do those things. and we would have regular check-ins. Thinking about it as having a guide of specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound goals is actually really helpful. And sometimes it doesn't have to be perfect. And sometimes it's easy to procrastinate to make the SMART goals perfect. But the SMART goals are really designed to help you get the project going, right? To break past that hurdle, that procrastination feeling or just that fear feeling, to give you a bit of a path. And then what I suggest is revisit those goals, right? As the project goes on, the project changes, so the goals need to change.
Very good point. And also talking about not perfect, I think maybe it's time to talk about when some goals and some plans don't go exactly as planned. And we know that learning from mistakes can be very effective, and sometimes that's actually the time when we learn the most. I would like us to help our listeners to learn from others' experiences and would ask you to share a time when a goal didn't lead to the outcome you hoped for, and what did you learn from that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is where we get vulnerable. I remember I had just finished my MBA. I had moved to Egypt and we were working on some grant work. I was working at a microfinance foundation. I was doing a fellowship there, and the ask was I needed to put together a business plan. And I remember thinking, wow, I also did not feel qualified to do that work. And it felt very overwhelming because I don't speak Arabic. I felt like that was a bit of a hurdle. I didn't know anyone in terms of I was new to the organization with a big task, and there was a lot of people to talk to. And I remember feeling very overwhelmed and it felt unmanageable. And what I realized in the moment was I remember thinking, I don't know how I'm going to do this. So I actually went back to my boss and I was like, and I said to him very directly, I said, how do you expect me to get this done? I don't know anyone and I don't really know the business that well. And he said, that's the point. I want you to go meet everybody and I want you to go and get to know the business really well and then articulate it with a fresh set of eyes. One of the things I'm going to share as a theme I'm going to share with you, really spending time thinking and understanding the problem. And I was very fortunate because Ashraf, my boss in Cairo, he was really helpful in helping me think through the problem. And I spent the time to understand why he had tasked me with this complex piece of work. And I think that was the first piece was of getting over that. There was like that mental hurdle in terms of making that successful. And then I think what happened is that gave me some confidence, right? And then I would just go and check in with him constantly. And I would talk to the CFO and I would talk to the chief operating officer and I would hear their different ideas. And then we built a structure. And that was the initial plan was I built a bit of a structure. I said, you know what, let me just get something on paper that they can react to. And Ashraf was great because he even said, he's like, if it's wrong, it's fine. It doesn't matter. He's like, we're on the same side. We're on the same team, but put something down so I can react to it. I can give you some ideas. I can say, do it in this order, or what about this, or add this here. And I think that was actually really helpful in terms of being vulnerable in the organization. So I could go to my boss and say, hey, I have an idea, but I'm not really sure. And what I learned, what was successful in that as well, is I went in with a perspective, right? So it didn't mean that I just went in and I said, oh, I don't know how to do this. Because what he's asking me to do is, Al-Karim, go figure it out, right? And what I was able to do with him is I said, hey, Ashraf, look, I have an idea. I'm not sure if it's the right idea, but let me try. And it was like 60 to 80% there, right? And that really helped me then break down the problem. And inevitably, I think I wrote like a 30-page document, which I could have never imagined doing. And I got to meet so many people across the country and understand different aspects of this organization. And that business plan was then used to secure millions of dollars in grant funding from a variety of organizations. So it felt special to me to be part of something so meaningful. But had I not spent time to break it down into smaller pieces, it would have just been overwhelming and unmanageable.
This is really the main point, right? That breaking down the problem into manageable steps is the key to tackling a big problem or a big idea. And what also resonated with me a lot, I just can't highlight it enough, is importance of getting feedback and not being afraid to ask for some support. When you feel that you are struggling, it's okay to share about it. You don't have to struggle and suffer and be afraid to make the next step. It's okay to make the step and get some feedback and grow from that, even if it was a mistake. And Jordan, I want to ask you now if you could share a time when a goal didn't work out as you expected.
One of the most clear memory I have about having challenge was definitely when I was doing my goal work. One challenge I faced when building my project, starting my project Karsa, was the goal was too big at the beginning. It's too vague. It didn't start with a clear plan to build mobile medical clinics. At first, it was just a general idea. Hey, maybe we're running a health campaign. But the vision kept growing and the scope became bigger than what we had clearly mapped out. It became something more than that. Then, as a big dreamer, a teenager, the reality suddenly hit. When we calculated the budget properly, prices were increasing and suddenly we were over budget. I remember thinking as a 16-year-old, how am I supposed to raise this amount of money? But at the same time, I was also preparing for my national exams. I was also applying to universities. I was managing school. I need to do tutoring. There were moments of burnout. It definitely felt heavy, and backing out wasn't really an option anymore. So instead of stopping, we adjusted, we reduced some parts, protected the core impact goal of the project, and restructured the budget. We adapted while staying committed to the purpose. And the work is really big on promoting resilience and adaptability. And I've realized that it's not just a concept. It's actually what a wordee actually experience. It genuinely forms you through the process. Especially for me, participants and alumni of the work, resilience and adaptability were built step by step, sometimes without even realizing it. And that experience taught me something simple. When a goal is too big, too vague, everything feels overwhelming. But once you redefine it clearly, make it realistic, make it a structure, it creates a real direction and it creates clarity that changes everything.
So true. I would also want to say that when goals aren't clear, it's so hard to stay motivated. It's not only about tracking progress, it just, you might not be able to see if you're going in the right direction at all. Goals that are not specific or realistic, they will just become frustrating. And smart goals, this is the whole point. They shouldn't be creating additional pressure. They are there to help you with an action plan and with clear vision. I think it's time to share some practical tips, and I would start with something I personally used to struggle with, realistic timelines. When we are talking about that goals needs to be time bound, of course that's important, but you don't want to set overly ambitious deadline and be too tight with your time. There is nothing wrong with adding some buffer time. So if something comes up or you're feeling unwell, you still have enough time to stay on track. Another little thing that helps me with this is setting up checkpoints along the way so you can look back and reflect on your progress. And I would suggest putting these checkpoints and the main deadline as well, somewhere visible. You can use whatever works best for you, your desk calendar, some planners, or app on your phone. It's a simple but effective step on the way to achieve your goals. And what tips would you guys recommend to our listeners?
I have three things I'd like to share. The first one is, I think sure it's an excellent one, so I'm going to try and share different ones. But one of them is really, focus on, what is the problem that you're solving and defining what does success look like. And that's the first thing, a really important piece. I think the second thing that I've learned quite successfully is that write down what is to work on next, so that when you start the next day or you pick it up next, you're not having to figure out what has to be done. You already know what you need to do. So you have a clear plan, and build into the calendar reviews with your leader, with your team. So if it's due, if it starts on a Monday and it's due on a Friday, make sure there's a quick check-in on a Tuesday and a longer check-in on a Wednesday and a quick check-in on a Thursday. Because even though it's due on Friday at noon, bringing people in at Friday at noon means you've lost out on so much collaboration. And that will also help move the journey along. And I want to end with one really interesting quote I saw on a piece of luggage, actually, but it's stuck with me, is that dream without action is hallucination. We want to achieve big things, we got to get started.
I really agree with what you said about focusing on the problem and then building a realistic timeline. And well, for me, everything comes back to small steps. And honestly, doing something meaningful makes a huge difference. When the goal really matters to you, it doesn't feel like pressure. Even when you're tired, you still care enough to continue. But overall, you need to do it. And it's joyful when you actually do it. Reviewing progress is important too. I try to be honest with myself. Did I actually hit the target? If not, why? Not to be harsh to myself, but to adjust. That's where my resilience grows. And adaptability is simply how you respond after that reflection. So for me, it's small steps, honest reflection, and staying connected to how you started.
Thank you both. As we wrap up, I want one of the key takeaways to be that goals should be inspiring, and the award can be your training ground to follow the goals you are excited about, get used to overcome the fear of the first step, and to build that leader mindset. Jordan, Al-Karim, thank you both for joining me today. And for everyone listening, here is your challenge. Take that one big thing, whether it's a school project, a career move, or a social justice issue you care about. Make it smart, chunk it down, and tackle the first milestone by the end of the week. This has been Beyond the Award. Go take that first step and stay tuned for our next episode.